Hey guys, welcome back. So, one of the topics that ail every artist there ever was is the feeling of frustration that you're not improving, or what's worse, I guess, you've worked on a piece for 20 plus hours or so and it turned out awful. This garbage feeling you never get used to. Before I start, I want to give some context that I'll be talking over this time lapse of my own take on Ross Draw's character for his new art book, Bloom 2. At the start of August, he was hosting this Draw This in Your Style challenge to celebrate the book's release, and I thought I'd join in because I haven't taken part in an art challenge for almost a year. 2021 was, a lot happened, and there hasn't been enough time for me to tackle the art objectives and skills I wanted to improve, which I think is the perfect segue for the rest of this video. Let's get the one thing we already know out of the way. Drawing and painting is like playing sports or going to the gym. You don't accumulate points and hold on to them indefinitely. When you stop going to the gym, you become out of shape. Doesn't matter how dedicated and disciplined you were before you stopped going, right? You lose your progress. It's the same thing with art. If you're not consistent, almost to the point of being religious about it, you rust. You lose your progress, and that's one of the biggest frustrations people struggle with, especially when art isn't their full-time job. I'm one of these people. Work and work-related things and other life obligations take up so much of my time, so much of my mental energy, it's only expected that I'd lag in my journey. I'm frustrated with my art like 90% of the time, and it becomes terrifying if I dare compare myself to someone literally half my age and they're producing higher quality art. Really puts into perspective how long this journey is. At the end of the day, everyone's life is different, and as a result, people are gonna improve at different speeds. But at least if I'm honest with myself, I can forgive myself just a little bit. Not completely, but just a little bit, knowing I'm not lazy. I wouldn't even say I have poor time management. It boils down to exhaustion, plain and simple, and having little time to myself. And when I say exhaustion, I mean you're so tired you can't even clean your house. You can't even make food. You can't even sit down and mindlessly watch a movie or play a game. That kind of exhaustion. When you're that tired, you wouldn't be able to sit down and focus on creating art that means anything. So be a little kinder to yourself. I want to say this is the result of the capitalist world we live in today, but that's a topic for another time. So, I've noticed that some artists, especially ones that are quite talented but aren't yet professionals, draw and draw, but they don't feel like they're actually producing anything, because most of their work is purely conceptual, incomplete ideas, or purely for practice, as in learning how to draw hands or noses or cars or whatever. So they may have the entire sketchbooks full of hands and noses, but then ultimately they have nothing to show, you know what I mean? Because extremely few people will be interested in looking at a sketchbook full of nothing but noses. One of the best pieces of advice I can give is this. First off, you don't need to be super detailed in your work. Here's the thing. Hyperrealism is indicative that someone has amazing patience and observation, but the vast majority of art-related industries do not need you to be this detailed. When you spend hours and hours and hours trying to create a photorealistic copy of a photograph, unless your client explicitly wants that, you're ultimately wasting your time and energy on details most people won't really notice or care about. There's a huge spectrum between super simple art styles and hyper-realistic art, and most art and art jobs fall somewhere in between. When it comes to improving your skills, quantity actually beats quality. Instead of spending 80 hours on one hyper-realistic portrait, you can use that same precious number of hours to learn a lot about human anatomy. You can draw dozens or even hundreds of human bodies and faces and expressions in those same 80 hours. And learn to make yourself stop after a certain time limit. Otherwise, you might find yourself working the same sketch forever and ever. Learn to let go and move on to the next piece. Learn something new on the next project. And as you draw more and more, your brain begins to memorize how things look and you begin to draw faster. That's called muscle memory, and eventually you don't need to use many references anymore. You can just draw it from your brain straight. And I'm not saying this to poop on hyperrealism portrait painters. If that's your market, good for you, but for any other artist, you would be wasting your time spending hours laying down every skin, pore, and freckle. You don't need it. Your client doesn't need it. Most industries don't need it because there are other tools and software you can use to produce the same photorealistic effects and textures at a fraction of the time, which is why, in my opinion, being able to draw well and draw quickly is a more important skill to improve than copying a photo accurately. So to reiterate, learn to prioritize quantity over quality because the more art you make, the faster you'll improve because obsession with minor details isn't important. Set yourself a time limit to finish a piece and do your best to do the most you can within that time frame. Trust me, this is one of the main ways I improved over the years, by deciding that a work is done once I hit the deadline, say 10 p.m. for example, then I move on to the next thing. Now, the other important piece of advice that I admittedly struggle with myself, again because of time limitations, is giving my art a frame of context, having some kind of big goal in mind. That goal can either be something tied to telling a story or something purely aesthetic in which someone would find meaning. For example, say you want to improve your perspective drawing, which is something I definitely need to work on myself. It's a waste of time to just get a sketchbook and fill it with random, unconnected rooms or characters just suspended in vacuum. The tougher but better approach that will hugely improve not one but many aspects of your drawing skills and will force you out of your comfort zone is to create a comic or a manga. Your art has to be a product, not an ingredient by itself. When you want something sweet, you buy a finished cake. You don't eat flour. Same basic principle. Your art has to be a product in some way, however simple. It either has to tell a story or communicate a thought or emotion or aesthetic appeal of some value. And the framework of forcing yourself to stick to a deadline regardless of how happy you are with the final product will help you improve faster. If you want to watch a delightful and relatable example of this, I recommend you check out Meiri Hiranashi's YouTube channel where she explains her journey becoming a self-published manga artist, using Patreon as her platform to regularly update her manga for her fans, after she failed to get published the traditional way. I'm gonna leave a link to her channel in the description box. She explains her process, and even though she knows her art still has a long way to go and there are still skills she doesn't feel she's great at yet, she makes it her week's uncompromisable goal to publish a new page. She's extremely tired after her day job, she's tight on time, and that affects the quality of her art a lot of the time. But having an end product in mind and setting a deadline for that product to be in people's hands no matter what does something to you. It pushes you in a way even technical improvement doesn't. It's just a strange human thing, isn't it? I'm taking Meiri's story as a role model to look up to. This year I told myself I have to upload a new video to my YouTube channel once every 3 weeks. The main goal here for the time being is consistency. Am I always happy with the quality of my videos? No. The way my situation is right now, I can only afford to create commentary videos and share some time lapses. That's all my time and budgeting will allow at the moment. I have a lot of ideas for the channel that I'd love to explore and I think would give people more value and happiness. But for the time being, this is all I can manage. But the goal is to not stop, but rather to improve in spite of the limitations and in spite of the challenge. And when I think of amazing YouTube artists like Ross Draws, I remember that the reason their content is so good and entertaining is because this is their work. They've built up to this over the years until it became their full-time job to produce great videos. It's what they're paid to do. So don't be too hard on yourself when you feel like you can't produce the same quality or content as these people. You have other things going on and no one gets everything in life. Everybody's journey is different, everybody grows at different paces and has different priorities. To get something, you need to let go of something else. That's the way the world is. Otherwise, it would just be called paradise, and Earth isn't paradise. Anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you guys gained something useful from it. For me, learning this advice was in many ways just as useful as learning the technical side of how to draw. Take care of yourselves and know that no one can work 24/7. Show some kindness towards yourself, and I hope you have a lovely week. Please subscribe to my channel, as it's my goal to reach 100 subscribers in 2021. Easier said than done. And know that I'm always open to hearing ideas for videos you'd like to see from me in the future. Stay safe.